Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Hi. Welcome to the next panel. Please come settle down if you're going to join this session. How's everyone feeling? Good post-lunch? Full? Do you need to stretch? Do you need to go for a run? Okay. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce this next panel. I think it's always very interesting because we're going to be talking about funding. And my name is Max Pischalik. I'm a partner at Impact Amplifier. I see so many familiar faces of ventures and businesses and partners that we've collaborated on and trained. So it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Marietta, Zvi, the SANBio team, Tiru. It's a wonderful opportunity to have such diversity. Diversity in life science and bioscience businesses, diversity in culture, even in sitting and having the pleasure of working with scientists, really thinking about how to commercialize the IP they've developed. This is something we didn't experience 5 years ago. We have a new diversity of funders, which weren't around 5 years ago, and what we're sitting is at probably the precipice of a very new entrepreneurial ecosystem that's emerging. A bit like nature emerges naturally, organically, so too this ecosystem is emerging, and so too the relationships that SANBio is forging across countries, and both the global north and the global south makes this a really special and unique occasion. So today we have a really, really solid group of panelists, which I can say for a first conference, which is a rarity, that some of them are actually investors that are investing in some of the core sectors, businesses, and stages that many of you are developing their solutions. Now that is quite a rarity because often we go to conferences and there's such a misalignment, but today we don't have that. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for a panel discussion on these new funding opportunities, what's opening up, what's possible. It gives you as entrepreneurs the opportunity to talk to investors with actual capital to invest. And what I really hope is that we can have a real conversation with energy, with passion, and real discussions that leaves with the outcomes of you being able to understand what you need to do to get your venture to the place that it is ready for capital and that you can scale your ventures. So, with that in mind, this is not going to be a panel discussion exclusively for us. I'm going to try as a facilitator, cut that short. It's really going to be a conversation as much as we possibly can, but also allowing our experts to demonstrate their expertise and to really give what they see as the opportunity in the countries that they're investing. So, as I said, I'll be the facilitator. My name's Max Pischalik. Our work at Impact Amplifier across the SADC region primarily is there to help early stage post-revenue companies reach deal readiness and access capital. So we are on a continuous basis training, accelerating entrepreneurs, doing transaction advisory work, and helping you access money from investors like these. So in some ways, I will play the role of facilitator, and in some role where supportive, I can also answer some questions for what we see being obviously South African and SADC based. With regards to our panelists, we have closest to me Mr. Eric Pohl from the HWeb, based in Luxembourg and in South Africa. Eric Pohl is a managing partner at the HWeb Fund, a Pan-African VC fund. This newly created hands-on fund invests in seeds and seed and A-round companies, earmarking further funds for subsequent rounds. It therefore ensures its portfolio companies have the potential to scale up. Eric brings to the fund 25 years of complex business-to-business leadership experience in consulting, executive and investment roles, especially in the life science and health ecosystems. He's also instrumental in leading venture capitalists and private equity firms to great success and setting up large biopharma medtech funds. Thank you for joining us, Eric. Mr. Yark, I always get your surname wrong. I've known you for so many years. Sprupenberg, is that close enough? Okay, thank you. Jaap is the managing director of Hivos Impact Investments, which manages the Hivos Food and Lifestyle Fund. This fund invests in scalable, impact-orientated companies that produce healthy food for local markets and strengthens natural ecosystems. He has been an entrepreneur for over 20 years and brought several social enterprises to scale. He has worked for Hivos, the foundation, from 2012 to 2016, where he was responsible for the relationship management with private sector companies, sales of carbon credits, and the investment portfolio. He manages active investments in wellness, real estate, agricultural companies in the Netherlands, Thailand, and Argentina. We have next to, and let me go one back. Sorry, Mikko, I skipped you there. Mikko Savolainen, did I get that right? Close enough? Okay. Mr. Mikko is head of marketing at Investor, a leading digital investment bank providing digital fundraising and equity crowdfunding services in Northern Europe and investment services to investors in 70 countries. He is a digital marketing generalist with 2 master's degrees from Finnish universities. Mikko will also be introducing crowdfunding concepts to you, which they have been developing at Investor, and we'll do that after the introduction. So thank you for providing that, Mikko. And then we have Mr. Jackson Imwata from Vilgrow, Kenya. I know the Vilgrow India team really, really well, so wonderful organization. It's been a leading ecosystem player across the globe or in developing countries. Jackson is a corporate finance professional, I guess based in Kenya, with vast experience in the East African capital markets, having executed a spectrum of assignments involving capital raising advisory and management consulting, which includes financial modeling, market research, strategic planning, investment advisory in private and public sectors. At Vilgrow, Kenya, he heads the financial advisory efforts that are aimed at assisting portfolio companies solidify their business models, investment thesis, and become investment ready. So from an East African perspective, they're a similar advisory firm to us. So I think we'll be able to give you a perspective of bottom up to investors and investors looking top down at entrepreneurs. So I hope this to be an interesting conversation. I will give it over to Mikko now for his presentation and on crowdfunding.
Great. Thanks a lot, Max. Thanks everyone for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll be giving a very brief introduction to crowdfunding and what it actually means. A disclaimer in the beginning: I'm not. Our firm is currently not active in the African market, so it's more of a theoretical and kind of learnings from Europe kind of view at crowdfunding. But Europe is the front runner in equity crowdfunding, so I think it's a very relevant type of look. So let's begin. So Investor was founded around 5 years ago, and we're basically doing what investment banks have always done, but we're just doing it digitally. So we're helping growth companies access funding, find investors both big and small, and do securities issues, whether that's equity or bonds. We're licensed in Finland, and we've passported that license to the entire European Economic Area, currently operating in the Nordic countries and the UK. In total, we've, in that span of 5 years, we've helped fund around 109 companies, I think it is currently, and our acceptance rate, so out of 100 cases, we accept 5 on the platform. So we're quite strict on that. Our investors come from all over the world, currently up from 74 countries, so it's quite a varied mix, including both institutional investors, VCs, business angels, and individual investors as well. And we're headquartered in Helsinki, but also have branch offices in Stockholm and London. So as for what crowdfunding actually really means, of course, it's based on a platform. It's a platform business. The supply side is the companies raising funding. So basically you have a platform where companies can present their offerings, issue shares, look for investments, look for subscribers for those shares. And on the demand side, then you have the investors. And connecting the two is the business. And that applies to all types of crowdfunding, more or less. It's not always shares or securities that the investors are taking or are paying for. It can be something else. It can be a charitable donation or whatnot. But we only focus on the investment side of things. This is a rough look of like Northern Europe. I think this categorization is always very important because, as I said, there's so many different types of crowdfunding. But on the left, you have the rewards and the donations side. And I think here in South Africa or somewhere in Africa, there's a Thunder Fund, I think it is called, in the rewards side. So that's a good example of a rewards type platform. Also, Kickstarter would be one. And then when you look at the right side of the graph, you see the more investment types of crowdfunding. So you have lending, different types of IOUs, and then in the top right corner, securities, which means equities or bonds. And I think a local player also, again, I'm not sure if it's South African or from somewhere else in Africa, but Uprise, I think it's the equity crowdfunding player in here. So very similar models, but the investor bases are very, very different, and the business is very, very different. But what we're really talking about with crowdfunding, or sometimes called marketplace finance, or just digitalized corporate finance, it's all really about the same thing. It's about connecting investors and investees via online platforms. That's really as simple as it is. And it's the main benefits, we generally see 4 of those. As digitalization in basically any area usually lowers costs. It lowers costs for all participants, both for the investor side and for the company side. And on the company side, it's had a very concrete effect in enabling small companies to be able to access this kind of private financing. Usually, well, investment banks won't really have, they won't have as clients very small clients because the fees are just too high for them. Too high, the rounds that the companies would raise would be just too small for them to really bother. And then faster funding rounds, of course, just facilitating speeding up the entire cycle, making the capital cycle quicker is one key benefit. Sometimes these angel funding rounds can really last for a year, sometimes more, because nobody wants to say no. Ours last typically 1 to 2 months. Increased transparency. This stuff used to happen a lot in cabinets, closed cabinets. Nobody really knew what was going on. You had to be networked to actually know about these kinds of unlisted investments. Nowadays, it's all online. Everyone can access it. And with that also comes the democratization of investments, so that all investors, rather, big and small, can access the same deals. Usually, of course, if there's a lead investor, such as a VC fund, they will have negotiated the terms, but it's quite an opportunity for the individual investors to be able to join with the same terms to the funding round. This is usually, crowdfunding really started in the very, very, very left side of this graph, so in the very valley of death, but nowadays it's kind of expanded to cover the entire spectrum. I think 50% of our cases that we found are, we would classify as seed cases. Then around 40% are more or less growth stages, so scale-ups, and then around 10% are actually IPOs. So we cover the entire spectrum. And that's where crowdfunding is going, or has gone in Europe in general. And quickly, these are some of the growth rates that we're seeing in Europe. The UK is actually excluded from this because it covers like 50 to 75% of the entire European equity crowdfunding market, so it tosses these numbers around quite a bit, but approximately doubles every year. And very quickly to finish, there's usually 5 things that we look at that really help a company be able to, that a company really needs to have to succeed in crowdfunding. It's lead investors. You always need to have a lead investor because nobody wants to be the first one. You will have to negotiate the lead investments from someone. there needs to be a strong story, both from an investment point of view and a more emotional point of view. Simple structure. With professional investors, you can negotiate very complicated structures, and they will usually negotiate very complicated structures. But for individual investors, you really want to keep it very simple. Just one share class, one shareholders agreement, and that's usually the maximum that you should do. Good network. The company really needs to be quite well networked, because the way these funding rounds are sold or marketed are through networks and virality. So that's really key, and that ties directly into great marketing. You need to have some kind of marketing capabilities to be able to do it. I'll finish with this one case that we had, Askel Healthcare. I won't go into the details. You can Google it or access it at askelhealthcare.com. They are a biotech company making. They have a regenerative solution for like joint damage, and they were a university spin-off, pre-revenue. They came to us, and we organized basically their seed funding round. They raised around 600,000 euros, which would be around 10 million rand or something around there, and it's really a great case for how we see these types of campaigns going. And I'd love to tell more about it. I think I'm running out of time here, but you can come discuss it with me later, and I'll be happy to tell you more about it. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, with that, I would like to just move to Eric. Eric, if you can really introduce your funds in Africa, what you're doing, and give us maybe a good example of the profile of investments that you're looking at.
Yes, with pleasure. But first I'll start by our philosophy of investment. Well, you know that we say that innovation and entrepreneurship is universal, but that opportunity is not. And that's typically this paradigm we want to shift. We have created the HWeb Fund, so that's a VC fund that invests in early stage, so seed and Series A. But what we do is that we invest early, but we earmark capital to follow the company through its growth, through its progress. And the word doesn't sound modest, but what we bring is smart money, basically, and especially in the case of biotech, as entrepreneurs, you are going to face issues which aren't very easy, that aren't easy to tackle, starting by regulatory, for example, but also recruitment. Who do I recruit? How do I deal with the EMA, with the FDA, etc. So once we have invested in a company, we actually help them, we turbocharge them, let's put it that way, to ensure that they scale up. So our fund size, we actually have two funds. The first one is a sector agnostic, and it's 50 million euros. And the second one so far is 80 million euros. So that's a total of 130 million euro. And those 80 million euros are invested mostly in biotech, life science. So if you have an interesting project, don't hesitate to come and see me. Very important thing. What we want to do through those investments is really to build African companies in Africa and make them grow in Africa. But the prerequisites, I mean, if you have copycats, don't come to see me. What I want to see is true innovative companies who at least have a Pan-African ambition, but especially in life science, I expect you all have a global potential, and that's your aim, in which case, happy to talk to you later.
Yep.
Nice. When Eric says that he likes small investments, I think we are making micro investments. We run the HIFOS Food and Lifestyle Fund. We invest in very small starting companies in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, and South Africa. Typically, with potential to grow. We make investments from 750,000 rand to 7.5 million, and looking for a minimum turnover of also 750,000 rand on annual basis. So that's really, really young. We like to be their first investor. So that's, we like to be the lead investor, being the first to invest in your company, to bring it to a scale wherein we can attract other people to join the next investment rounds. We actually invested in a company spun out of the business of Max Green Fingers Mobile, and that company helps companies like Nendo source directly from smallholder farmers sourcing the chili. It's a software business. We liked it because it has a huge impact on smallholder farmers. It's technological, so it can scale. The other investment that we made was in a small tea shop in Cape Town, Lady Bonin, who makes the most delicious organic rooibos tea. And actually what we did is that we helped her scale in the B2B business and in the online business. So we try to add knowledge that we can do from a Dutch perspective. We are Dutch fund. We have an office in Johannesburg. So if you have a small company with huge ambitions and you make sustainable food so people eat healthy for local markets and you produce that in a sustainable way, just like Eric, reach out to us. And I think we fit each other well. And I want to make one comment on the crowdfunding. We do run another fund in the Middle East, where we actually also invested in a crowdfund platform for arts and culture in the Arab world. So I do really believe that it would be very useful to bring your crowdfund model to this region. Yes.
So thank you very much. Just to keep it brief, we are an incubator, Will Grow. Our franchise partner is in India, the one you're talking about. So we launched in Africa and started in Kenya. So we've been operating in this an African region. We are currently incubating 15 startups. So we come in early. We come in very early. We help the startup to come up with a proper business model. And then we also provide pre-seed seed capital. And then we work with the startup in a non-cohort-based incubation program. And then we introduce them. We link them out to the bigger investors. So in summary, that's what we do. We incubate healthcare and life sciences businesses in Eastern Africa. And now we are looking into other countries of Africa. And you're currently also setting up a seed fund. So our fund will be providing very early stage investments in the same sectors, healthcare and life sciences. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. You know, everyone, it's such a small ecosystem, this, and really the relationships are, as we know, the world's getting smaller and smaller. I mean, just Vilgro in Chennai, where it started, the founder started the Andy chapter, or was one of the founders of the Andy chapter there. We started the Andy chapter in South Africa. This ecosystem has long established relationships. And I think that what that means for entrepreneurs too, is it's really important that you nurture relationships, because these ecosystems are getting really, really small. And I think as the ecosystem is growing and we're becoming more connected globally, we're finding in Africa, we're finding more sources of capital moving into the continent. However, the question has been arising in the ecosystem for a long time, which I'm sure Jackson can contend to, is the readiness of the deals to absorb that capital, especially at the early stage. And that readiness of meeting the minds of an investor and many investors who largely come from a very financial background, and you're coming from an entrepreneurial background, that meeting place where a deal can be put on the table and that you have the right elements in place is really, really important. One of the challenges which I would like to put to the panelists is that the typical fund management models globally of 2% management fees and carries of 20%, to what degree and to what level can funds provide capacity? And so the question is how do you folks as investors, how do you provide that capacity, and do you feel that the readiness of the opportunities at an early stage Do you sort of agree with that hypothesis that when you're seeing 100 opportunities, are you seeing 100 ready companies? Or is it very labor intensive to find the nuggets and the readiness of the nuggets to be ready for your funds? So I kind of, I'm open to starting with one of you who might want to just get a sense of what level of support you provide these early companies, and to what degree your fund management models can support serving a business that could be sitting in Senegal, but your investment team could be in Johannesburg or Cape Town or in Europe, and how that works in your universe.
Yeah, I can go first. So what you have seen in our market in the Eastern African region is that there are so many good opportunities. There are so many people, so many scientists with awesome ideas, innovative enterprises. Now the problem is usually how they are packaged. And many bigger investors, in our view, don't have a lot of time to look at very small investments which are not ready. So we come in and we help them, for example, to solidify their business models, think about important things like pricing, think about unit economics, think about a proper business plan, think about marketing strategies, just build a business from the start. So what we do, we provide pre-seed investments. We are currently providing $50,000 to very small businesses. Now that helps them to write a proper business plan. That helps them to build a proper financial model. And then we link them with other early stage investors. So by the time they are meeting a bigger venture capitalist, then they have ticked most of the boxes. Yeah. So what we do, we basically sit in the interface between the science and the industry, because we find that many scientific businesses are not packaged to communicate to non-scientific investors. So we interpret the science and make it a business proposition.
Thank you, Jackson. Any other comments from those who have the money on the readiness of the deals?
Yes, with pleasure. First of all, like Pauline said earlier on, seen from the US, Europe, or China, there's Africa. But for you guys, often there's your own country before the rest. So what we tend to see is very interesting technologies, different interesting approaches, but a business plan which doesn't match this. So if we are really in love with the with the technology, we feel that there's really a global need and it's really paradigm shifting, etc. We may work with the team to help it be more ambitious, develop its business plan. One thing we haven't done, but I'm quite clear that we are happy to do it, is that if it's technical scientific team that comes to us with a project that seems very interested and really first class on a global level, we are prepared to help them find a business developer, an MBA or whatever, maybe not an MBA, but just a good business developer who has experience of the market, so that the company can actually take off. And that's also the beauty of investing early. So that's the first point. To answer on the quality of the pipeline, because of this, well, you understand why we decided to be Pan-African, is that we won't hesitate to go and find the nuggets where we find them. But my hope and my determination, and if I'm doing this here in Africa, is that, and first of all, there's no competition between us. We are all part of the ecosystem, and the more we are successful, the more you are successful, the more kids in school and in universities see potential jobs in their country or on their continent. So this aspect is important for us. But really, my dream. Some people call me mad, but no, I don't think so. Before 10 years, I want our African fund, to be at least 1 billion euros. But to reach that, we need you. we need the ecosystem to grow. We need the ambition also to grow. And well, we are a newly established fund, so we've made 3 investments so far. But one of those investments is in fact a medtech company, and they have one big US competitor. But what they have come up with is absolutely staggering in terms of technology, in terms of ease of use. They are way ahead the US competitor. And guess what? They are 38 times cheaper. And they have received an award from Johnson & Johnson. They have received an award from the International Association of Anesthetists. And clearly, they are going to go global. So you can do it. To paraphrase someone who said, "We can do it. You can do it too."
I think there are many paradoxes in investing here, Max. I think we don't invest in a business plan because actually the companies that were failing had the most brilliant business plan. We invest in the entrepreneur first because the business plan will not be realized. We know that. Never a plan comes through because your company is going different, the market changes. So for us the most important is the character of the entrepreneur, and do we believe that the entrepreneur will go on and on and on when everything gets shitty and he just, or he will just do anything to help the company grow. And the companies that we are investing in, they're really, really small. So what can you expect of those companies in terms of audited accounts and business plans? But then again, we need to ask those questions because the people that are actually investing in my funds, they need to have those reports because so it's not our own money. So people invest in my fund and we invested in the companies here. So we also say to entrepreneurs, we need to have audited accounts, not because I don't trust you, because my investors don't trust me. And I think the whole balance between the expectations of European investors and the reality on the ground here in Africa, that's a big challenge. So there's a huge gap between the things that we are doing and the institutional money in the Netherlands, who basically said, yeah, what are you doing? It's not possible. Your deal size are too small. You are investing in Africa, you know, it's like a black continent where everything is wrong and they don't see all the opportunities. And we need to convince them of that business case and build a bridge between the entrepreneurs, and that's always a huge challenge. So basically my drive is to prove to the world that it is possible, because when we prove it is possible, it's scalable. If it's about the technical assistance, I think there's a lot of talk about technical assistance, but I think the big question is what is useful technical assistance and what is not. And there are a lot of programs. We are here at SANBio having great technical assistance. So what I would like preferably do is to extend money to the entrepreneur so he or she can look for the right technical assistance themselves. And we are like a friend. And a friend helps you, but sometimes a friend also tells you the truth. And so it's not this or that. It's paradoxical, yes.
Before I open it up to the floor, and this maybe you mentioned it, Jaap, really well, is it's in my observation in the ecosystem over the last decade, it's not necessarily only the technology that you have, it's not necessarily the degree that you have, it's the person that you're investing into. And one of my observations in the entrepreneurial journey is as soon as you leave the stable environment of a government job, a corporate job, that stability, and you move into innovation where everything is unknown and you are faced with failure every single day, there's a certain aspect of grit and psychology for you to become successful and become creative and solve problems when you're in an under-resourced environment from a capital standpoint and you're facing the unknown every single day. And one of the things not talked about in the entrepreneurial ecosystems is what are the facets of the character of the entrepreneur that you're investing into? Because when you put capital into anything, you can not only scale opportunity, you can scale disaster. So if you're investing into someone with a massive ego who, you know, is very top down and not collaborative with their management team and has got a lot of hate and aggression in them, you're actually making the pressure worse. If you think it's bad with one employee, it gets far worse at 10 or 15. So I wanted to kind of ask you before I open it out to the floor, what aspects of the character, the psyche, the self-worth, the relationship, the personability of the entrepreneur are you looking at that is not necessarily what you see in your criteria that might go to LPs? It's the softer things. And I just want to, maybe if you folks can give me 2 or 3 aspects that really stand out for you, that would be wonderful.
Well, the first comment, I wouldn't invest in your guys, first of all. I wouldn't invest in the guys you mentioned. The first thing is trust. You need to have trust both ways. You need to have trust in your investor. You need to trust that when things will go wrong, he won't hit you on the head, but he will actually say, hang on a second, I've seen it in other cases, etc. Let's think and let's find a way out. But you need trust also on the other side. I mean, the worst thing is when I have founders pitching, and I ask questions and I see something is awkward. I mean, know your figures. Don't overpromise, and because generally you under-deliver. I prefer if you do the opposite. So, to be short, trust is really an important one. And the second one is resistance to stress, because indeed entrepreneurship is really a roller coaster world. We don't want to infantilize we want to grow and help our portfolio companies, but certainly not infantilize them. And if you allow me to add a third one, that's teamwork, because an entrepreneur, an innovator, as you all know in labs, when you're on your own, you don't go very far. So to me, that's really critical to assess that the team is complementary, that it's going in the same direction, that they have a good resistance to stress. So to be perfectly frank, sometimes before I invest, I on purpose put stress on the team to see how they react. And it's not me being sadistic, it's just a non-scientific way of assessing things if they don't have previous experience to share with me.
I can actually add a couple of experiences to that from the crowdfunding side. We actually do the same, the kind of stress test thing, because it's extremely important, especially when working with these engineering or research background people, that they can respond under pressure, that they're kind of quick-witted, quick on their feet, and that they can kind of, we can sort of try and extrapolate that they will withstand the pressure of a public campaign. There's a lot of pressure going on during a crowdfunding campaign because it's all public. So that's actually a very, very key thing. I would say the second thing that we always look at when seeing if a company is crowdfundable or not is there usually needs to be some kind of this more extroverted character or characteristic in a key decision maker within the team. If they're all introverts, it's usually a bad sign. At least our data shows that, and that's kind of just the fact of it. You need to have someone who is more salesy or more marketing oriented, and of course teamwork. Like Eric just said, that the team really needs to play well together. I would say those 3 things are what we look at on the crowdfunding side, at least.
I think trust is the most important, so I'm going to say number 4, 5, and 6 after your 1, 2, and 3. I think for me the most important thing is that the person really lives the brand. I want to have the feeling that there's nothing else that an entrepreneur could do than to make this company. And I really have to love the product, because when everything goes wrong, I have to think at least their tea is really delicious. So we actually were looking to a company, and it was a good investment case. They make vegan cookies. And then we tasted the cookies, and actually it was not your cookie here. Your cookies are delicious. and I didn't like the cookies. And I couldn't bring myself to making the investment because I knew that when the company would not do well, I would not endure the stress of handling with an entrepreneur because I just didn't like the product. I think those are for me the most important things.
So, I'm just going to add two of them. When you're working with very early stage businesses, we like people who are very open-minded, because sometimes when you're working with them, due to our experience and how deeply you get involved, a few things could change in how they thought the model was going to work. We might recommend some things that may be a bit uncomfortable in terms of, for example, financial discipline. So we advise them to be very open-minded when they're working with us. And then we like people who like to take risks. What I've observed in the countries I've worked in Africa, is that the biggest challenge we find in early stages, because the company cannot pay much to the founders, then you find that most of them will have day jobs. So they're basically doing this on part-time. And it's very difficult to implement an idea like that. So we encourage people to put both feet in, so at least we're able to help them. And we also provide financing so that can take off. So we really work with people who are working on part-time. So we like to see commitment.
So yeah, just last comments by me before we go into the floor. I think as an anecdote, those who are the loudest and the most desperate for money are often the least investable. And I think there's a certain part of character that I see sometimes around their personability. There's nothing worse that I've seen from an investor standpoint when you're getting like chased down and literally you can see the person wanting to suckle on your thumb for money. And that feeling of desperation doesn't often present actually a meeting place of trust and relationship. It can actually push people away depending on that desperation. So I think that's one layer that I think is really important, is to notice in your own self. Yes, you need to raise capital, but there's a certain degree of desperation for capital that can also put off investors. And it's just to know in yourself where that level is and be balanced within that. So with that over the floor, that's my my commitment to the floor, that we don't have too many desperate requests coming from the audience. But I'm going to take some questions to the panelists and the facilitators.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The question would go to Miku. I see that you've assisted more than 100 startup companies to raise capital. I want to find out that out of that number, how many have been successful or sustainable in terms of growing their business? And then apart from the social aspects of the founders, what are the top 3 characteristics that you look for in terms of the decision that you make to help these companies raise capital? Thanks.
Great, thanks. Great questions. So the first one was about how many of the 100 or so companies that we've helped get funded, how many of them are actually still up and sustainable. The answer is 95% of, we just did this analysis actually, and 95% of the companies that we've funded over the past 5 years are still up and running, which actually surprised us quite a bit too, because they've all been very risky investments. That only 5% have stopped trading is quite nice. As for actually becoming profitable investments, the industry in Europe is still, it's only 5 years old. So we only had a couple of exits. We've done a couple of our earlier companies had done IPOs. But it's very, very, very early to say. There's just not enough exits yet to say whether they actually were good investments or not. But most of them are still up and running, so that's a positive sign. As for the second question on what kind of criteria we look at in the companies, it's kind of a 2-tiered process with us. We first, because we're licensed, we have to do a certain amount of due diligence on the companies. So we always we have an investment committee that goes through every deal, and we look at these very, very kind of traditional things, that the team, the financials, the markets, the innovation, and so on. But then we, of course, due to the nature of crowdfunding campaigns, we actually emphasize various marketing and branding related aspects quite a lot, as well as network and community aspects, because of the kind of the networked and open nature of marketing these kinds of offerings. But once the investment committee decides that, okay, this is a good fit, great, let's put it on the platform, then it comes down to the second tier of decision makers, which are the ultimate investors in the end. And we also did a survey on this a while ago. We only focused it on to our individual investors, so retail investors investing around 2,000 to 3,000 euros at once, not the professional segments, because those are their own beasts. And the retail investors are, this profit potential is number one, of course, but a very, very, very close second is being part of some kind of trend. So there's this kind of trend investing, global mega trends that play a heavy part in that. And third is values, really just finding direct early investment opportunities that are working, say, in wave energy, in sustainable energy generation, that they really personally feel very strongly about. Those are actually very, very big motivators for investment decisions. Did that answer your question? Right, thanks.
Hi, I'm over here. See? Okay. So I'm Will, and I have a question. It's a bit sensitive question, but I'd appreciate as specific answers as you can give. And it's related to the terms and conditions and valuations of companies and how you go about, first of all, I mean, once you've decided to invest in a company, how do you kind of arrive at the terms and conditions that you place the investment in? And if you wouldn't mind, or if you have any insight into kind of what median pre-money valuations of companies in the areas you're looking at. Again, I realize it's widely divergent, but any guidance you can give, I think some people might be interested.
Okay, because we are early stage and the companies are going to grow, we know that the founders need to keep the steering wheel, so we will come at a low level of shares, I mean 12, 15%, going to 20, 25% at some point. But we want you to keep being the founders and running the ship. That's and this is why I know there are some investors, and especially angels, who say, oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to make a lot of money, let's take 51% of this company. That's stupid, they are killing the company, especially since when the company will need a subsequent round, they won't be able to fund it. And anyway, the founders will probably have been gone by then, because they will have lost their baby, so it's stupid. As far as valuation is concerned, it's so wide that unfortunately it's not that I don't want to, but I can't give you any indication. It will really depend from the sector, from the stage, from the potential. But generally, we are very straightforward in our term sheets, and our term sheets don't have 25 pages with very complex clauses that well, yeah, we've seen that all the multiples, etc. And then the founders realized that, in fact, they fought on the valuation, they were happy on the valuation, but there were other clauses, and well, in the end, at the moment of the exit, they don't get exactly what they want. So, but we go back to the mention of trust. We need trust also before the actual investment. And part of my pre-investment due diligence process is I'm French, so with my team, we take the team to a restaurant and we have lunch or dinner together. And we don't talk just about the company, we talk about a different subjects so that they know us, we know them, and we see if there's a fit, because we run for quite a few years together, and if we can't stand each other, well, it's bad luck.
I want to give you a good example. Quite recently, we spoke to an entrepreneur, and the investment offer, the entrepreneur was turning over about 2.5 million rand. For a 100,000 euro investment, they wanted 45% of the company, and they placed a ratchet in that if they missed their targets, for every 10%, they lost 10% of their equity, which would have taken them to up to 91%, possibly, of the company on their first round of money. That's the things.
Should give the name of the investors so that some of them.
Yeah, but I think this is the role that we have to play in this ecosystem, that we don't see that sort of thing, and we see it when there's markets with no money, and it's very important that we stop that.
Well, probably when we make the investment, it's always overvalued, because you're talking about really small companies. We have set some limits to ourselves, and so we pay maximum for a valuation of 5 times the current turnover, which is quite high multiple, but then the company needs to grow. You can play a little bit with which year you're taking. Are you taking the last year, or you taking next year? Sometimes it's also because you don't know, we don't know, and the entrepreneur doesn't know what will be the growth of the company. So you can sometimes also come up with some clawbacks, wherein you take a larger percentage, also not the majority of the company, and then when the entrepreneur hits certain milestones, that they get back a percentage of the share. So you're mitigating the risk of the unknown, because I don't know what your company is worth, but you also don't know what the future will entail. So, and what you're saying, it needs to also allow for future capital rounds. So we like to make small investments initially, also to test the market on both sides, and then when the company is growing, we can make future investments. So if we make 100,000 investments in a company that's doing 50,000, then you dilute too much. So you could break that into different parts.
Just to add something, I've observed that sometimes, depending on the nature of the business and the cash flow health of it, some investors prefer to come in with some kinds of debt, some varieties of debt, convertible debt sometimes, or some other kind of hybrids, just to try and defer that valuation conversation a little bit and help the business to solidify a bit more. So I have seen some investors come in with a convertible debt, which you convert like that 6 months on. Sometimes I have seen some debt priced at below market rate, but then with a royalty off the top. So there are so many creative ways of structuring financing for very early stage businesses. If the idea is to defer that valuation discussion to a bit later.
Maybe I can add one more thing. That I mean, yes, when it comes to valuations, it's always it's incredibly difficult in the early stage. Nobody knows what's going to happen, and that's in crowdfunding. We generally try to tackle that issue with delegating the responsibility to the lead investor, which is often a VC, and then they have to they take care of that negotiation. If there's no lead investor like that, which is there are very few cases like that, then we rely on our own database that we've collected from various sources. But of course, benchmarking like that is just incredibly difficult in early stages, and there's really no way around that. It's always going to be difficult.
Thank you to the panelists for your insightful discussion. I just wanted to pose a question in terms of support. Is there any way that you also support, let's say if you compare our region, we are very much short of knowledge per se. Is there any way that you support the ecosystem itself, the climate programs, like accelerator programs? I don't know how you would recoup your monies and all that. I'm thinking about what you see like in Boston, in Massachusetts, that there are companies that come and not supporting an individual company, but a program that then trains, gives access to entrepreneurs so that your base now for getting good ideas is widened. And then the next thing is, do you feel that in our region, you seem to be too risk averse, that you need to actually know that this idea will work before you invest? Because if you look at the stories in Massachusetts, many businesses fail. And in there, many businesses succeed as well. So there is a willingness to test ideas, but here it's like maybe we need to know that it works before we put some money into it. Thank you.
Okay, two very good questions. I'll be answering for myself. We are working on an app that will be actually open to any African entrepreneur, where he will be able to find many information about investments, about entrepreneurship, about where to find grants, where to find incubators, etc. And then there will be a second level of this app, which we'll use for our portfolio companies. And our portfolio companies, we will support them in finding the right knowledge, as you call it. If they need coaching, if they need mentoring, if they need to recruit special capacities, then we will go down that route with them, because basically, while we do this, okay, it costs money, but at the same time, hopefully, we improve the business of the company, we improve its valuation. So that's the first point. The second point was about, I forgot. Yes, of course. You know, in Silicon Valley, the name venture capital came from adventure capital. And in French, I don't know if you know the word, but we call that capital risque. So definitely the approach is not the same. I can reassure you, we are in the first category. And basically, even though we try to de-risk before making our investments, we know that most of our portfolio companies won't perform as expected. This is why I agree with you that a business plan, you make a business plan just because when you're a sailor, you need to know where you're going and roughly through where you're going, especially if it's a sailing boat, it will depend on the winds, etc. When you're creating your company, you're not sure that someone is not creating a competition and will launch shortly after you. And if I can add just one point and a piece of advice, it's know your competition. A lot of people look at competition just around them, but we use analysts. You have also a very good analyst at your fingertip, and it's called Google. You take a few keywords, you go into Google, and you see the other people, and you concentrate on other geographies.
I'd like to add to that last point that it's I mean, we've received around 4,000 funding applications in total over these 4 years, and it's incredible how many are unable to name a single direct competitor. It's unbelievable. Never say that you don't have any competition. That's never true. There's always direct, or if not direct, then indirect competition.
It could be true. If there is no market, you have no competition.
Right, yeah. That's true.
If there's no money to be made.
Yeah, but you have those investors and they ask, what's your competitor? And if you say you have a competitor, then you say, yeah, you're not a business case. And if you say, I don't have a competitor, they say, I don't have a market. You know, that's like that's the game that investors play to always put you in the corner that you're not investable. It's also just a negotiation tactic, which we have in the sleeve to get a better deal out of you. So if someone is asking that, know that whatever your answer is, it's always wrong, but they're just testing you. On your first answer, I am in the very luxurious situation that we are an island of a for-profit organization in the midst of a sea of a non-profit. So HIFOS Food and Lifestyle Fund is started by the HIFOS Foundation, which is a big donor organization from the Netherlands, which invested 15 billion rand in Africa since 2010. So we're since 2000, sorry. So I'm very proud to be part of that, and we just released a 50 million program for this year to invest in entrepreneurial support programs. But I think also, while I like the support, and in the end, you need to be the person to do it. So you can't ask for help. I think that's one of the big strengths. But I think also in Southern Africa, you need to be careful what you wish for. So if you look to the East African markets and all the NGOs chasing the same impact deals, and there's really a huge bubble going, which maybe as an entrepreneur, it's nice to have too much money chasing the same deals. But I see NGOs making deals with entrepreneurs for 10 million euro valuation in companies that don't even do 10,000 euros. And then they're saying impact investment doesn't work, or you always lose money in Africa. Yes, if you make those deals, you will lose. And in the end, that bubble will burst, and then the whole ecosystem will collapse. So, well, we are coming here because there are not so many people, and we can make a change here. I also hope that in 10 years, we will not be here with 1,000 people chasing 100 entrepreneurs and then destroying the ecosystem. So we need, I think, to learn and look for East Africa, what does work there, but I think also we need to be careful not to duplicate the mistakes that are made in East Africa.
Sorry, I'll go after you, Jack.
Yeah, so like I said, we are an incubator, and I would recommend an incubator to any very early stage entrepreneur who feels certain knowledge gaps, because apart from just connecting entrepreneurs with capital, what we also do is train them on various areas of investment readiness. And we also are very keen on mentorship, so we encourage them to identify experts in their areas who can mentor them, who can mentor their businesses. And this could take various forms. You could identify a co-founder who is not necessarily in your field. For example, if you're a medical practitioner and you are opening a clinic, you could identify a retired hospital administrator, something like that. Or you could even come up with a board of advisors of people who are experienced in the sector. So that knowledge is very, very important. We recommend that you get a mentor.
Just Colette, on your question there, on the first one, one of the things that we need to as an ecosystem solve is the cost of investment readiness acceleration, because it's often labor intensive, expensive, also if you're flying out entrepreneurs like all of you folks. And I think one of the ways that we're trying to solve that is, as a consortium, is pulling technology-driven curriculum that entrepreneurs can go through an investment readiness process, especially technology businesses like yourself, in a way that's scalable, Pan-African, that can reduce the cost. So you can virtualize a large portion of that. And I think that's one of the issues in the ecosystem is, for the funds, deal sourcing, but for players like ourselves and funders, is that often these acceleration programs are expensive. And they can take 5-6 months. And who pays for that, and how is that I think, still an issue in the ecosystem that needs a lot of work.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm here. Thank you so much for this interesting conversation. My name is Pauline, and I work for the African Innovation Foundation. My question is actually linked with what you just said. So when we work with innovators across Africa, they say they're looking for investment. They're looking for investors. And then when we interact with investors, they're saying they can't find deals. So something is missing. It's something to do with the ecosystem, as you just said. If, let's say, if the goal today is to try to see how do we bridge this gap, is anyone among of you on the panel willing to look into, for example, dedicating a certain percentage of your fund towards actually investing in structuring companies so they can be more attractive for investors? Because obviously innovators are innovating, They use what they have. Most of them don't have access to any funds. And they want to attract the big fish. But the big fish waste, you know, at the end of the line, and that's where, again, you have a lot of people falling into the valley of death. So can you do something about it from an investment perspective, not as a charity, but more as grooming, you know, businesses so they can be more profitable for you?
You hear me? Okay, sorry. Simple answer for you, yes. We've got, actually the H-Wave Fund started as a foundation in South Africa, training entrepreneurs, and they faced this valley of death. And this is when we decided to start, well, my friends came to me and to others, and we decided to start this Pan-African fund. But the foundation is still there. But we have decided that part of the carried interest of the fund would go into the foundation to keep working on entrepreneurs, and we know that those entrepreneurs have very few chances of coming into our fund, and somehow it would be probably a conflict of interest anyway. And this foundation will also work in school for boys and girls, and especially to train, to encourage the learning of sciences, because that's very, very important. So yes, the ecosystem is very important. We need to develop it. We need to put money at it, and it's actually an investment, because the larger the ecosystem, the more potential investees will find. And all those distinguished gentlemen who are at my left, I don't see them as competitors. On the contrary, I see them as partners, be they incubators, very early seed, or crowdfunding. We're all, and academics, and public sector also, because you need also some public willingness in the different geographies to encourage, because what I see is really great enthusiasm coming from you, so it drives my enthusiasm. But then there are regulations. I'm thinking about IP, for example, where something has to be done. So every single player in this has a role to play, and then we'll make it.
So the answer is yes, that's possible. But the entrepreneur also needs to work and cooperate. And on the critical note, not so much, it differs a little bit with the country, but there are also countries that we are investing. And when, so you're sitting and you're talking with the entrepreneur and you're starting to ask questions. So what is your revenue, what's your profit, can we see the numbers? And sometimes there's also a hesitation to share with us what the company is actually making, which is maybe understandable in a context where you show what you have, then maybe political forces may be taking it away from you. And so there is also the fear of, if I be transparent in what I'm making, some politician will come to me and they take my company. Yeah? So, or they ask, which of my 3 bookkeepings you want to see, which is the most awful thing to say to me, because if you have a double bookkeeping, which one will you show me to me? So I think it makes sense to realize before is that it needs to be transparent both ways. And there is also, I've seen very good deals that broke on the unwillingness of the entrepreneurs to show me what they were actually making. And you cannot ask, not you, but an entrepreneur cannot ask the money that I'm managing for other people if they don't want to show what they're making now. So it needs to also come from both ways. And I see at least half of our deals breaking in an unwillingness to share financial figures.
Afternoon. All right. Once again, thanks a lot for your input. My name's Fabrice. I'm in a medical tech startup. And basically through our journey in obviously navigating all the different use cases for how we could implement our technologies, we stumbled upon a common problem where you see what's happened in a lot of first world countries, and obviously trying to somehow localize it to South Africa and some of the other African states. I want to get your perspective regarding looking at what you see obviously in your first world countries, Europe and America, the type of success cases with different technologies, and just how that differs when you get into the African plane, and more specifically, what type of trends and ideas do you see being particularly investable in an African context?
I think the opportunities in Africa are huge. And I think actually, when you're a good entrepreneur, it's good, really, I wish I would be younger, we all do. And I wish I was an entrepreneur in Africa with the knowledge that I have now. Because it's very difficult to compete in a very competitive and efficient market. And we see a lot of solutions here in Africa wherein with relatively simple and well thought to solutions, you can be highly efficient and gain a lot of market share. And I think actually there's a stand over there, Live SA, that tweak their product to make it so cheap, because it's a poor market here, that actually when you're looking to their product, I think they're so competitive and so cheap that they could export to the developed market. So the context is different. But I think actually the opportunities here are better than in Europe.
Two more questions after this one, please. I'm not taking the choices, maybe at the back here.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'm Tamaya. I'm coming from Lesotho, Science and Technology. Okay, I have just two. The comment and question. I'll start with the comment. Actually, the way I've seen here in our region, the entrepreneurship training starts at the very later stages. And that also has impacted on the drawbacks that we are having. So maybe if most of us can try to change this legal educational framework so that it can cater for training of entrepreneurs at the lower level from the scratch. Not necessarily trying this entrepreneur to integrate it at degree level and upwards. That thing also is somehow killing us. And the second portion, which I want to ask as a question, in regard to the incubation. We've been having incubation, trying here and there. But what I've realized, you'll find that the incubatees do well during the incubation period. But once they graduate, when you have raised them to go and really face the world, we really get serious problems of the collapses. So I just want to find out from you what strategies or mechanism in place that will ensure the follow-ups in terms of monetary and evaluation, and where possible, reinvest so that at least you try to minimize the number of collapses on our incubators beyond incubation period. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so how we do it in our incubator, and I think what you're saying is true. Sometimes if you're a part of a cohort in an incubation system, sometimes you find that after the graduation, then you struggle coping. So how we solve that in our program, we run a non-cohort based program. So it means that we custom make the program for each incubatee based on what they require. Because sometimes it's not bad to fail, because if you fail fast, you fail safe. If you take too long to fail, then you're going to have very expensive failure. So if you're failing business, it's safer if you fail faster. And having said that, I would say that Our non-cohort-based incubation program helps us to custom make that program for a specific entrepreneur that addresses your very specific needs. Because more often than not, you fail because you tried to adopt something that doesn't work for your business. So if it's a business plan, then we draw a specific plan for your business. And then we think with you. And that's why I said at the start, some things could change as we engage. So sometimes we found that how you avoid that death is changing certain things that you thought would work. But then after interacting with us and the mentors, then you find that what you thought would work actually doesn't work. Then you have to adopt something different.
Yeah, my name is Emmanuel from Malawi. I wanted to follow up the issue which he mentioned, that entrepreneurship in this part of the region starts quite late for most of us. My professor, after he retired, he taught me business plan. Then he went into business. Then he came told me that what I taught you is not what business is all about. This is like he spent 50 years, 55 years. Now, I don't know whether, and Africa, the population is young. Actually, the future of Africa is in the youth. And there are so many of them. I don't know whether you have thought of some program of having a pipeline of young innovators whom can be worked with within our systems, universities. They start doing and playing with business opportunities as they are young. It will take perhaps a long time, but I see that investment into that in the long run is going to make it, one, sustainable, but also bring up a good Africa environment in terms of entrepreneurship.
Well, in terms of education, I mentioned that in our foundation we were developing programs so that in schools science was taught, and there were more equipment, for example, to teach science to boys and to girls. But you need to put pressure also on your political people so that they work on it. I had a heated discussion a few days ago with a Zulu warrior who's also a professor of political science at UCT. And he told me, but the colonies, the French, the English, etc., let us do in Africa what we have to do. So by all means, do it. Put pressure on your politicians. In South Africa, you have a new government. We see changes in other countries also. So put pressure, but yes, the sooner, the better. To give you a small story, I've got four children, and the youngest is now 12. But when she was 8, she was cooking cakes every weekend, and we thought that that she was nice. She was bringing snacks for her friends at school, but no, she was taking them to school to sell them because she thought we weren't giving her enough pocket money. So entrepreneurship can be taught quite early.
Thank you, Eric. I like that analogy of your child. So just we're coming to the end, and as we're coming to the end of the session, and this speaks to Emmanuel's comment around youth, I want to bring probably maybe it's the most controversial of the comments and questions to the audience and the panel. And obviously we leave what's best for last. But this reflects on a program, an experience that I had probably about 18 months ago with a group of young entrepreneurs that were in a program with the African Leadership Academy. We were with 18 entrepreneurs, all under the age of 30. And we were really trying to discuss investment readiness in their context and their largest challenges. And one of the entrepreneurs from Senegal put up his hand, and when he put up his hand, he burst into tears. And I could see it was really emotion for him to explain his challenge. And when we had it was a 5-hour session, but it actually translated that we needed to spend 1.5 hours on this because it actually erupted so much in the group. And I want to bring it here because part of it's a confidence is as we look forward to Africa, we must never forget that we also come from our past. And we carry a lot as human beings going into the future, and we experience a lot. And one of the experiences that was unanimous from all the entrepreneurs was as they were in the process of raising capital, they felt quite deeply that the sources of the money in Africa, largely that they were speaking to, large of them were impact investment focused from Europe or the US. They felt that they were, and a lot of them were actually also in East Africa, they felt that a lot of the investors were investing into expats and not Africans as a major issue. And we had to unpack that because many of the entrepreneurs felt that if they brought an expat co-founder in, they were suddenly more amenable to investors than going by themselves. The two South African entrepreneurs who were a partner, one was actually white and one was black. They burst out laughing because they said they're so used to it in South Africa. If they go speak to a private equity firm, they make sure they bring the white partner. If they go speak to the government funders, they bring the black partner with too. But it was really an emotional thought, and when we started to unpack it, we understood that there were two issues going. They felt very deeply that there was a bias placed against them, but at the same token, they also realized that perhaps some of their communication to investors was not as professional as it could have been, and both issues were happening simultaneously. That's where we ended off. And I wanted to raise this because this is sort of the things that we have. And I wanted to start maybe with Jackson because East African entrepreneurs felt that that was one of the biggest issues. And I want to get a reflection from you if that is an issue and to what extent the rest of the audience feels that that's a perception thing that's probably worth talking about before we end. And this doesn't go only from race. This is gender-based too. So they felt it was, and as you notice, we're all male on the panelists, but this was very much a gender-based question too.
Thank you for that. I would say what you're saying is in a big way true. Most young people feel like that. Most young people feel that if you have a white co-founder in your business, then you stand a higher chance of being funded. But I must also say that it's changing with time. So we are beginning to see more businesses owned by purely local Africans being funded. So I think we've come a long way, but that's changing. Yeah, that's changing. And I think part of why that is changing is even the local institutions encouraging entrepreneurship, local universities, and also the emergence of incubators, because then incubators will not discriminate. So I think it's got to do with access to information, and like someone said earlier, our education system, and all that is changing. So things are changing for the better. I don't think you're going to be having that problem 10 years on.
I think you touched upon a very sensitive issue, Max. Gender, I don't agree. At least we have a 50-50% spread in the portfolio over gender. But all the companies that we invested in Africa, they're actually not with expert, but white, like you, and like Jessica. And it's been an internal discussion within my team this trip is why don't we succeed in making investments in black entrepreneurs? Is it that the things that I ask are culturally biased? So is it a way to relate to me in words that I understand? Is it maybe the fact that I think audited accounts are a solid practice case, and so that's also why I was touching about on the multiple bookkeepings. Is that something that we, or is that normal or not? Is it the fact that my team is white? And so I don't know. It's not an unwillingness, but I see the deals with the black entrepreneurs breaking, and I don't know why. Probably it has to do with me. Probably it has to do with the black entrepreneurs. I even thought maybe there is a hesitance of black entrepreneurs having investors in their fund that are white. Maybe there is some kind of resistance in having impact investors from Europe. I don't know. So if someone more privately than here on stage wants to share some things that could help us in that, we would be very open to that. I refuse to make an investment in an entrepreneur because they are black, because we are invested in people and not in color. But I do realize it is an issue.
First of all, in terms of diversity, Harvard Business School published a study. They looked at the US companies, and the US companies who had a good level, who had diversity at a high level in the corporation, and they were talking about black executives, were outperforming the white ones by 35%. So that's my first comment. The second comment is that I had lunch a few days ago with an entrepreneur who comes from, I'm not going to pronounce it well, but Kailicha, so a big township outside Cape Town. And he's doing extremely well. His ambition is to get listed, and I'm sure he will do so. And believe me, he's very, very, very professional in his approach. Luvuyo, exactly. I don't see any obstacle. And to invest, when we were talking about the team, will the team be able to deliver what we expect? Not is the team white, black, Chinese, male, female, gay, straight. I mean, we can go on and on, but I mean, it's not an investment decision, and also on a moral ground, it's completely stupid, because Harvard Business School says it. That diversity helps, and also I'm on the gender side. I'm a father of 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and I don't see why my 50% of my children shouldn't be judged on their capacities.
Yeah, and actually, just to contribute a couple of research numbers from crowdfunding research, because crowdfunding success rates are being researched quite a lot at the moment, and it seems that the more diverse a company's team is in terms of ethnicity, it actually correlates quite well with the company's or the campaign's success rates. Not sure what the root cause is, but I mean, it's the data seems to say that that's the case. In addition to female entrepreneurs, their success rates are a lot higher than men's in crowdfunding. Again, not sure what the root cause is, but that's just how it is.
Just on the cause, to joke, I tend to say that men overpromise and deliver, and women do the reverse. Yeah, but it's funny to say that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Tirela from the Botswana Innovation Hub. Maybe if you could, I did make the observation, I think I've had the mic for quite some time, that our investors in our panel are all male. But that's besides the point. Could you kindly share maybe on the statistics of how many female-led enterprises that maybe you invest in?
So far we made 2 investments, so it's a bit early to say, but the next one we are going to sign, well actually I'll be here, so another partner will sign them tomorrow. There are 2 ladies, 2 black ladies we are investing in, and it's just that they are great and what they are doing is great and we believe in what they do, and they're the story.
I don't actually have that number right now, but it is under 50% for sure. It's more male dominated for some reason in our deal flow. Just from the deals that we get, they are mostly male entrepreneurs. I think I would say it's around 75-25 spread there. No idea why that is, but maybe it's because typically male entrepreneurs, I think it might be a stereotype, are more like of the risk-taking sort. And crowdfunding at this moment is still very early. It's very young. It's very risky in terms of what the entrepreneurs, they can fail in crowdfunding. That's a big thing. So maybe we are more still in the phase of these reckless male entrepreneurs. I don't know, and hopefully, I'm looking forward to the female entrepreneurs with better success rates coming on soon.
We have 5 investments. We have 2 investments in Lebanon. Of those 5 companies, 2 are founded by female entrepreneurs. They are still in the driving seats, and actually, one of the companies is changing CEO from male to female. So we now have a 40-60, and it will be 60-40. I think there is a difference in pitching between female entrepreneurs and male entrepreneurs. Maybe that's why we relatively, as a fund, invest more in females than our other funds. Is that I think it's true. They tend to under-promise and over-deliver. So maybe it's that I like more realistic plans than big growth curves. But you see that male entrepreneurs tend to be, in general, it's a generalization, it's not, but a statistic overall, they tend to be more ambitious. So I can understand if you're sensitive to that as an investor, that you choose that. I like a more realistic growth path that I think is actually attainable. I think, relatively speaking, that's what the typical female entrepreneur would present. But it's all stereotyping, but I'm just trying to help you figure out why it is like this.
Thank you, Jaap. We are coming to the end. I know this lady's been asking, but I'm going to take a comment, not a question. Just a comment.
This was a question, a very brief one, if I may.
Okay, we're not going to answer it, though. We're going to take it as an open question, but I'm going to give you this floor.
Okay. As you know, a lot of universities are opening commercial arms to commercialize the research of their staff, and students. Do any of you have experience? Okay, you can answer later if you wish at tea time. Yeah. Have experience in dealing with universities as institutions rather than individuals? In what way it would be different dealing with an institution as opposed to dealing with individuals?
I think that's an important question. University innovation as opposed to entrepreneur-led, but we're going to take that one offline. But thank you. Thank you. Everyone, thank you for your time. Hope this was a wonderful interactive session. Hope you enjoyed it. And we're welcome to chat to the panelists.